Mike.
Now we'll return the council meeting to order. We've just come from a closed session, and we apologize for holding you up here for beyond the 7 o'clock hour that we thought we'd be back into these chambers. There was nothing reportable out of our closed session. We continued to discuss the labor negotiations as they were listed on the agenda. Nothing at that time decided. We have already had our roll call, and we're all still here, such as it is. We'll ask for Anita Friedman to come forward and lead us in the invocation.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has created us, sustained us, and brought us together this day. O God and God of our ancestors, who gives salvation to nations and strength to governments, bless and safeguard our country, our city of Lompoc, and the people who dwell therein. Eternal God, protect and help our mayor and city council, shield them against all sickness and injury. Implant within the hearts of all of us a steadfast purpose to work together for the safeguarding of freedom, justice, and peace. Grant to all those here tonight such wisdom, understanding, and resolve that they may make the best decisions to lead our city in justice and righteousness. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Follow me with the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Be seated. City Administrator's status report that we received. Anything to add to that?
Nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any staff requests or announcements? Likewise. Council or redevelopment agency requests and announcement. The first is a request that we receive some advice regarding the volunteer efforts to construct a public park. I'll ask Laurel, you want to talk on that one first?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council members, and Lompoc citizens. The staff report before you is a collaborative report authored by City Attorney Joe Pannoni, Community Development Director Arlene Pelster, and myself. The report outlines both legal and policy considerations, as well as the legal steps to establish a community volunteer effort to construct a public park, also referred to as the Pocket Park, at 119 South H Street. The intent of this report is to provide the City Council Agency Board initial steps to proceed with construction of the public park on city agency-owned property that includes involvement of a community volunteer effort. The staff report outlines options A through D for your consideration. Selection of option A would retain the project as solely a city project. Option B would establish a volunteer component for the project while retaining the remainder as a city project. And option C would table further work on the project until other time specified by council. And should the council agency desire to provide staff other direction, option D should be selected. Of these options, staff recommends council agency consider option B, which includes a volunteer component, however retains the Pocket Park as a city agency project. This report is before you in response to the direction given staff during the council agency workshop meeting of November 3rd, 2009, when council agency heard staff presentations from Parks, Recreation, and Urban Forestry Director and the Community Development Director related to the proposed design and project cost to construct the Pocket Park project. At that meeting, staff was directed to return at a future council meeting to report on the feasibility of establishing a community volunteer feasibility effort for construction of the Pocket Park. With option B selected as the favored option, a volunteer effort would be established with an interested entity through implementing the 3 legal steps outlined on page 2 of staff's report. Staff would return at a future meeting to present a proposal to reduce the scale of the park project to a specific dollar amount, redesign the project, and establish a volunteer component. While just over $150,000 of redevelopment agency monies have been expended on the project to date, approximately $900,000 remains available in the RDA budget for the project, and staff has been advised that dollar amount of $600,000 and not to exceed $800,000 is feasible to cover the cost of a proposed reduced scale of the park project. Staff would then work with a professional architect to reduce the scale of the project within the specified dollar amount and return to council agency board at a future meeting for approval of the design. And at that time, the council agency board can determine what component of the project is feasible for a community volunteer effort. And staff recommends that council agency board review staff's report and consider for selection option B. And that concludes my report, and I'm available to answer questions. And City Attorney Joe Pannoni is available to answer questions related to the legal steps and considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barcelona. Are there any questions? Let me start, Bob.
Ms. Barcelona, I didn't get your figures. You said so far we spent about $150,000
Yes.
so far to date. And staff is recommending that project could be completed with an additional $800,000?
The revised project could, the range of $600,000 to $800,000, not to exceed $800,000 is feasible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Martiner.
Thank you, Mayor. A question regarding the legal steps. The legal steps will have to determine the nature of the volunteer group or corporation or entity. One of the requirements is that this group will be properly licensed, will have insurance and all of those things. What I like to see here is that in the proposal of the monies where we will have a volunteer component, we put a dollar amount to that volunteer component in case there is actually not a volunteer component that qualifies and follows the legal standings, the legal steps that are going to be required. We're not left with basically not being able to do the project because there was no volunteer organization that qualified for the job. So in that total grand number of 600 or 800, I would like to have a portion of that money as a contingency in case the volunteer work actually doesn't happen because there is no organization that actually qualified for with all the requirements that are being listed here. And the requirements are, they're quite stringent. I mean, we're talking about license, we're talking about insurance. Not all nonprofit organizations qualify. So we should safeguard ourselves and make sure that if there is no volunteer work that actually happens, the city still has the funds to complete the project. I would like to see that at one point in time in the proposal that will come up to the city. I will support option B. I think we need to have a volunteer component, but we need to safeguard the potential financial liabilities on it. Thank you.
I think because there's a recommendation for an action, a decision on the part of the council, even though this is under the presentations and not under the business section, I think we will allow public comment on this before we indicate how we want to vote on it. We'll open this now for public comment and for the public to come forward. And I see, Mr. Fink, you sent a message today and asked that I read it, but with you here, I would prefer you give your presentation in person.
John Lynn, President, Lompoc Valley Parks Recreation and Pool Foundation. The foundation would be happy to work with the city under option B proposed by the staff. However, before that choice is selected by the council, the committee would like an opportunity at the next council meeting or when the council deems appropriate to make a presentation. Let the committee show you the work that we've done and the committee's ability to carry out the full project. First, we can present the necessary legal documents of our nonprofit status as we did with the dog park that the foundation committee, another foundation committee completed for the city. Second, we can provide a preliminary scope of work for the project and present preliminary designs. We can present our construction schedule and the focus on building the park as the process goes on for completing the plans for the building. We will also present the fundraising program and the cost budget. If you recall, with the dog park, about half of the cost was covered by business donations of goods and services and discounts that businesses were able to get for us on materials from manufacturers. The committee has already completed the preliminary designs. We're in version 5, and we have a 3D walkthrough video presentation that we would love to show to you, where you can actually walk through the park and the building. We have donated services from a California licensed architect for the design and the building plans. We have donated services from a California licensed engineer for the grading and underground work. The engineer is LEED certified to plan our green building and fully solar lighting for the building and the park and a cistern and a whole bunch of other things. We have a landscaper, a plumber, a concrete finisher, a nursery, a roofer, a painter, a solar expert, and somebody else volunteered today, but I didn't have time to write it down. I don't remember, I'm sorry. And best of all, every one of these people sought us out. And they came to us and they said, we want to help with this. We didn't chase them, they chased us. Our fundraising program will not only cover current construction costs, but provide a long-term revenue stream for future upgrades for the park. Best of all, the dedication pavers will provide ownership of the park for Lompoc residents today and into the future. The Foundation's Dog Park Committee provided the city approximately a $250,000 grass dog park at a very nominal cost to the city, while the city of Buellton spent $150,000 on a dirt dog park. People from Buellton come to our park. We ask that you direct staff to have our committee bring a presentation to the council in 2 weeks. We're ready, or at a later date if you prefer. If you like what we present, we'll begin the process of park staff approval, Parks Commission approval, Planning Commission approval, and finally council approval, just like we did with the dog park. If you like Plan B better, we'll move forward with that option. We just ask for a chance to show you the results of our meetings and many hours of idea gathering, planning, and design. And I'm available for your questions, and so is Mr. Fink.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Let's hold it till.
Good evening. My name is Ron Fink, and I'm a member of the City of Lompoc. I agree with everything that John said. I support option B. I think it's a good mix between the city and volunteer groups, and I believe that the Lompoc Valley Parks and Pool Foundation can pull this off in concert with the city, and we can help. The focus of our group was about a dozen people gathered over several evenings, and we all sat down and said, well, okay, what are the primary goals of this park? The primary goals are to provide a windbreak, to provide some restrooms, and to dress up the downtown area. So we kept those 3 goals in mind the whole time we were doing it. I'll address the technical part of this email because the rest of it just agrees with what John said. So what we decided was that we would downscale the building to a concrete block building. The building would have the same mass as a 2-story building, but in effect be only a 1-story building, with about 1,000 square feet of it being dedicated to an art gallery. If you can picture a ceiling with an open truss roof, this is what we're thinking about. It's an open area. It's conducive to an art gallery to be really well. The the current building, the current plan sits on 1,500 square foot plot, and we would put our building on the same size plot. Spoke to the planning division, and they felt that this was pretty much within the development plan for that plot of ground, so we wouldn't have to go all the way through the planning commission again. We could go through Parks and Recreation and the beautification commissions before we got to the council, and you all said it was okay to do this. So we kind of checked on that ahead of time. Our building would be about 20 feet high, so it would provide a good wind block. We also discovered when we laid it out that because the building that was to the north wasn't going to be built, it also needed a wind wall along the north. So we said, well, what can we do with this wall? And we said, well, what we could do is we could offer it up to the Mural Society. They could hang their murals up there. They would have a place to paint them that was sheltered. They could paint them, and then they could take them and move them to wherever they were going to put them within the city. We also had public bathrooms which were in there, which were an important component to this, and that would occupy about 500 square feet of the building. We thought that green technology was very important. We know that the community is very aware of a lot of green elements that can be put into this thing. There's a lot of technology that's available that's relatively cheap. For example, solar light tubes. You just channel the light through the roof into the building, and there you got ambient light that provides for the time that the park would be open. You wouldn't need supplemental light for that. The roof offers an opportunity to place solar panels on the roof. We checked with a solar guy, and he goes, yeah, that'll work. Even though it's not oriented to the south where the sun is, it'll still pick up enough light during the day to create energy that'll feed back into the grid. It rains in Lompoc every now and then. We discovered that over the last couple of weeks. So what I did is I figured out the square footage of the roof and the cubic footage that was involved and figured out how much rainwater that was. Well, that's about enough on the rainiest years to fill a 10,000 gallon tank. So we figured we'd bury a 10,000 gallon tank in the ground before we started, collect the rainwater, put in a sump pump, and water the place all year long from the rainwater. These are the kind of green technologies I'm talking about. Now, the park itself, we went out there and looked, and it just so happened that the day we were out there, I'm over my 5 minutes, Mr. Mayor. The day we were out, want me to wrap it up? Okay, anyway, the trees were going to get in the way of the mural, so we downscoped it to about a half a dozen trees. We'll retain the fence out front for security purposes, and we'll rely heavily on green technology to do this, and there are award programs available for the city should we be able to pull this off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fink. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak to the item?
Evening, I'm John Lawrence, City of Lompoc, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. We are in favor of option B, and it sounds like a good project and within the scope of the city's needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. An outstanding short presentation.
Evening, Mayor, members of council, Ralph Harmon. When I looked over the options in the report here, I reluctantly would go with option B. And I say reluctantly because I think that when it becomes a city project, things tend to get delayed. However, if the council chooses to take the role of a leadership in this, perhaps it'll get done faster. But my real concern is the funding. And when it becomes a city project, will some of our funding that we would expect to get through private sectors and that'll disappear? And that's my biggest concern about it becoming more of a city project. I think if anything, the council needs to recognize our valuable talent in the city, in our volunteers, in the individuals and the companies that are willing to come on board on this and get with the program. Let the volunteers do the work. Let the volunteers take this project and run with it, and let the volunteers raise the money that's needed, and let the city back off as far as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Anybody else going to speak to this item? Sir.
My name is Robert Gardner. I'm a Lompoc resident, and I didn't realize that our city would be spending money on a park a volunteer park that sounds like a lot of money for a volunteer park. The 800,000, that's when we can't even seem to take care of our officers by at least having their salaries, like they should be. And I don't understand how we would be talking about a city park spending money on something like that when we have a lot more important place to spend the money in it. I must be misinformed or just not informed, but this kind of seems like it's not a right thing for our city.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. We'll see if we can address that. Is there any other comments or from the audience? I'll close public comment and we'll bring it back here. I will tell Mr. Gardner that the money that we're proposing to spend is not money that can be used for continuing operations. It's money that has federal money or state money through the redevelopment program, which is given to us solely for the purpose of improving the economic climate and economic development, and we're hoping by making the downtown more attractive, we fill some of those empty stores. It could not be used in any way for anything other than those purposes. So we're not taking money that could be spent on salaries or any ongoing operations to put it into this package. Bob, you got a comment?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm going to be asking a question of our city attorney on this one, but Mr. Harmon brought up a good point, and I had circled this. What Mr. Fink did not have time to present, by the way, Mr. Fink presented a synopsis to the council earlier with his proposal. The second to the last paragraph was actually another option for us. If you want, it could have been option E. And that was similar to what Mr. Harmon presented to us, is that the Pool and Parks Foundation take over the project completely with fundraising, construction, everything, with the exception. There was going to ask that the city provide permits, pay all fees, install utilities, and obtain approval for the project. Seems reasonable. So my question to the city attorney is, it was laid out what was permissible, what was not permissible. Let's say, for the sake of argument, the city were to, say, lease this property to the Pool and Recs Foundation for, let's say, a 2-year period at let's say $1 a year. If they had a lease on this project, they build a park. Could then the city still provide these services for them if they were the leasee of that property?
I'm sorry, through the mayor, which services? Paying for the permits and whatnot?
Yes. We would, if we were to lease the property, the park, to the Pool and Recs Foundation, they now take control of building the pocket park, raising the money, getting the volunteers, construction, everything else. All they'd be asking from the city is that we provide, as in there, the permits, install the utilities, and provide approval for the projects. So is something like that, is that likely? Can we do that legally? If we own the property still, they are the leasee.
You legally could do that. You could do it without leasing the apartments to them.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Rouget.
I have a different concern than Mr. Harmon does. I have concerns if it's a total volunteer project, if it would slow the process down, if it would, someone, one of the contractors couldn't fulfill his contract or something. So I have a different take on that one. I would favor option B because it would be a joint effort, and I would really like to see the city work with the volunteer group and work out the plans. I think some of the ideas and suggestions are very innovative, and I think it would be a really good idea to, work together to come and make this park a reality finally.
Thank you, Ms. Martner.
I have a couple of comments. One is I would like to see the presentation that the volunteer group has at one point in time. So I would like to request, and I know that nowadays we need to have more than just one council member requesting, to request to have a presentation in the near future from the Pool Foundation to show us what they have. I still think that option B is probably the most prudent option to go along, and the new idea of having it to be something that is not here in the report, having it to be a 100% volunteer project. I was under the impression that because we are using public monies, that was not possible, but I've been told by our legal counsel that yes, it is possible to have a volunteer organization basically use public monies. Now, I am not certain how right that is. What volunteer organization would be the right volunteer organization, and what project would be the right project? I mean, it boils down to, one volunteer organization using public dollars. So I have a little bit of an issue with that, so I will go with option B and have the city exercise what the city does as far as guiding, public dollars. I do want to see the volunteer project, and I do want to see the presentation that is going to hopefully give the city a good idea of what to do, and move on from there.
Thank you, Ms. Martner. Mr. Durham.
Well, I would like to interject another thought, too. There's been discussion that, as Mr. Harmon indicated, well, if we give it to the city, it's going to disappear. We've talked about unity in this community for a long time, and I give Mr. Lynn and Mr. Fink and the businesses and people that have stepped up a big round of applause. I think it's a great idea for the city and this volunteer group to work together in this project. We've talked about this project long before I sat down here, and I think it's about time that we do take option B and make it happen. I agree with Councilmember Martner. I would love to see that presentation, that 3D presentation, but I'm in favor of B.
Thank you. Mr. Lingle.
Yeah, just a final comment. I'm not against option B. I'd rather see us, as this gentleman up here stated, even though he doesn't like us spending $800,000 on this project, he understands now that this project cannot be used for paying salaries or anything, but we do have other projects that $800,000 could go towards, such as our community center. Coming to this meeting, I would really like to have seen us go with an option where the Pool and Recs Foundation, they take over the project, because, as Mr. Harmon stated, sometimes the city staff mingling with the volunteer organization may delay things. I just promoted you to the Congresswoman. Council Member Roger indicated that it may slow down the project. Well, unfortunately, we have a tendency to not be real speedy on the projects either, so I believe the project would probably be completed within, as Mr. Fink stated in his letter, 18 months. I truly believe it would. However, if the council does not want to go with that option, I will also support option B, but I would like us to at least consider turning it over to the Parks and Pool Foundation and let them take it over and us providing those services.
Thank you. Mike, okay. Your turn. Then I'll speak.
Well, if I remember right, when we first started talking about this, once I came on board, we were talking at 1.3, 1.6. Well, that would have put him in a tailspin. So I still like the idea of joining hands together with the community. I want this community to have a more favorable look at the staff. And if we have people working one-on-one with staff, I think we'll have a little bit better shot at, instead of rumors, instead of people saying, well, this is what happened, I heard it third or fourth hand. I just think it's a good thing that the volunteers and the city work together in the program. I'm sorry, that's the way I feel.
I think we're all talking about the same thing, because that's the way I read option B. Option B is to express the council's desire to have a partnership with a private organization to develop this. It doesn't call for a design to be presented at a council meeting 2 weeks from now so that we can try in this kind of a setting to design it. It calls for the staff and the foundation to get together, decide how much responsibility each can handle, to put together a plan, to put together who's going to do what, and then come back to the council with a plan. And I think that, Ms. Bartolome, is that what we've asked for?
Yes, that is.
The staff could work with Mr. Fink, Mr. Lynn, and put into the plan as much as they can handle, and take as much as we have to handle and do ourselves, and put it into the city's share of a contractual arrangement, and then put the whole package together along with the preliminary design, and then come back to council. And I think that'll speed it up a lot more than trying to have the council design a park here during a public meeting. If someone else has a different interpretation of option B, let me know. But I think it covers all of the things that we've all been talking about, including the options that you've been talking about, Bob, and including the recommendations. The only thing it doesn't do is come back with a concept right now in 2 weeks and present it without having looked at the staff, had the staff look at it, without having it looked at in detail. And actually, I think that would be premature. So I'd like to move that we vote option B. I think our discussions have told staff how much we want them to rely on the volunteer effort, and they'll certainly do that. And I just move we approve option B.
I second it.
And we got a motion and a second. And any other comments before?
Yes, I have a comment. I believe, and I'm not sure, I'd like to hear some clarification from Councilwoman Martner. I don't believe she was asking for a presentation to design, but I believe since she did request and Mr. Durham agreed, I believe it should be brought back just for presentation. We can still approve B, that it go forward, but I think we should respect her motion. For clarification, Cecilia, did you?
Yes, I would like to see a presentation at the council and to the public, because this will be the venue so the public can see what the Pool Foundation is doing. So it's something that probably needs to happen in the near future, since they have worked on it and it's present here with all of us. So yes.
But you're not asking us to delay this vote until that?
No, I'm not asking to do that, no.
Thank you.
I think it's premature to come back with a concept and a presentation before we've had the staffs talk to them to see who's going to do what. But it seems to me there's a majority want a presentation.
Well,
at that time, huh? Yeah, okay. No, right now we have a motion to approve option B, and I'll amend that motion if you want to include a presentation to come back to us as soon as practical to tell what ideas the Pool Foundation has. With the understanding we're not going to approve any design that night until after staff and everybody else has had a chance to look at it. So.
Mr. Mayor, we can separate them for that matter. I mean, we can vote on the agenda item here. I can make a request to have the presentation, and that can be second right after. And I think that would be the cleaner, right way to do it.
Without a motion, without an amendment, let's vote on the motion on the floor. Before we vote, we have.
Yeah, I need a clarification. I thought it wasn't the Pool Foundation. I thought it was the Parks and Recreation Foundation was the name of the group. I was wondering where the pool got in the middle of all that.
It is, it's all three.
That's okay, just a comment.
Okay, let's cast our votes. We approved option B. Now you have a request, Councilman.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make the request that the Parks and Recreation Pool Foundation gives us a presentation in their Pocket Park project. This is to be a presentation. There won't be any decision-making at the time as to what the design of the project would be, but it would be an opportunity for the foundation to present their ideas to the council and the public at large.
Ms. Barcelona, you understand the request?
Councilmember Martiner, now are you, for clarification, are you requesting this prior to staff coming back to council a future date with the proposed redesign?
I think this can happen at any time. The Pool Foundation has the time, and it could be a presentation in the beginning of the agenda. It could be as early as next council meeting.
I think we've already heard that there's at least a second on that one, and in the interim procedures that follows. When I finish speaking, I'm always inclined to turn the light off, but I'm supposed to leave it on a full time because this mic is hot throughout the evening. That's why people reach over and slap my hands or tell me, turn the mic back on. And it's just 20 years of habit. When you're through speaking, you want to turn the microphone off. Continuing with council or redevelopment agency requests and announcements. Are there any announcements or comments from members of the council tonight? Seeing none, I have several. And the first, I do want to wish everybody a Happy New Year. This is our first meeting of the year 2010. It seems like it's deja vu all over again. Last year at this time, we were wondering just what the state was going to do to us. This year, we'll probably know a good degree tomorrow night when the governor gives his State of the State message, and on Friday when he submits his first budget to the legislature. But the rumors are rampant that they're going to try to take a lot more money away from cities, and that we'll have to see what can happen with those. On that subject, I want to comment on one thing, and the League of California Cities has prepared an initiative to go on the ballot that will be very strong, telling the governor that he cannot, and the state legislature that they cannot take any city monies. Individual members of cities will be out with petitions. We are prohibited from using any city resources to try to promote that. I'll be on the phone quite a bit, and it'll be my own phone and at home. If anybody wants to contact me, my home phones are listed. My email is my own personal email that I pay for, and if anybody wants to comment with me on that. You may see meetings of more than two of us, because by definition, it is not city business. We're not allowed to use the city resources in any way to promote this. But most of us up here are committed to getting out into the community and getting signatures on the petition needed to put this on the ballot. So I have a meeting Monday afternoon, and I'm hoping that some of my fellow council members will join me in that as to just how we put the presentation out. We won't even be arranging that meeting in City Hall or on city premises, but you may see us seated in a restaurant talking, and there may be a majority of us. It's not a violation of the Brown Act, because it is by definition and not city business that we'll be talking about. It's an initiative item to go on the ballot. I do want to note that our webpage was modified today, and there was a big flag on there. If you went in, those watching at home or those that are here that might want to watch this other than through Comcast facilities in the future, click on that and click on that web, on that flag on the front page of our web, and you'll be able to watch the council meetings live on your computer. Within the next couple months, we will have we will add an archive capability to that, so that you can go back in the next day or anytime the next in the future and go back and review the tape of our council meetings. And we hope to have that archive thing modified also in the future, so that you can go in by line item number on the agenda. And if you only want to watch the discussion on item 5 on the agenda, you click on it and you go to item 5 and you can call it up. So we're trying very hard to make our actions much more available to the public. And we know more and more people are using sources for their TV other than the cable. And right now, that's the only one that carries the city council meetings. We have 2 workshops coming up in the next 2 weeks. Next meeting, we will meet early in the afternoon to discuss our procedures and how we will operate our handbook and a number of other things. The kinds of procedures we will be discussing are how we agendize an item. Do we still want to have a person request an item or a presentation in the future, one person ask, or do we want to have at least 2 people ask? If it's of interest to only one person, it might be, in my opinion, it might be some major waste of staff time and of the people's time. But it was, I feel, kind of like the parliamentary procedure on a motion. You don't even discuss a motion unless there's a second, and we'll be talking about that procedure. We will be talking about our current policy on prayer. I know there's a lot of interest in that in the community, and I have something I want to say after I go through this list. We will be talking about whether or not we want to as an extension of what it takes to put some action on the agenda, whether at some point in time it'll take 3 of us to vote to put together something very, very significant, at least a majority vote. We'll be talking about the thing we've mentioned before about requesting the county to give us a proposal to assume the responsibility for our fire department. We will be talking about goals for the city. We'll be talking about some other parliamentary items. One that I'm going to bring up is our current practice of when an item is pulled from the consent calendar, we usually put it at the far end of the meeting, and after all other business is taken care of. But that means staff has to wait here until sometimes 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night. We have substantially reduced staff. We have also told staff to take furloughs and do their job with fewer hours. And if I can, and I would hope that we will consider that procedure. We have talked about in the past a policy regarding filling the positions if a council member or a mayoral vacancy should occur, and that is that will be discussed. The things we discuss in that workshop, because it's in the afternoon, if they have any substance, if there's a change in our current policy on prayer, we will put it on an agenda so it can be discussed at night at the time that you have a chance to give your input. We're not going to slide any major policy changes through because we're having an afternoon workshop and people can't handle them. The other procedures and the going out on the request for fire with the county will not be decided at that workshop. The process of whether or not we do it will be decided, but I want to assure the public that for any major change in policy or major new policy, we won't be doing it at that workshop. We'll be discussing how we're going to implement it, and we'll see that you have an opportunity to discuss it. And the final comment that I have is that, and I mentioned at the last meeting when Ms. Martner was elected as the mayor pro tem that I thought Ms. Rouget stepped in last year and did a really, truly admirable job under very trying emotional and other logistical situations after we lost our mayor. I have spoken to Ms. Martiner, and I don't want her to sit off on the side and feel she's not going to be able to sit here unless I should, I will ask her at the next meeting, and I may do this periodically, ask her, I will move down into that chair, and I will ask her to chair the meeting that night to get some experience in here. And regarding the subject of prayer, you all should pray for her because she's going to have to control me. And sitting here, I have to speak last. And I don't usually say a lot. I speak after everybody else has, if there's something that hasn't already been said. But she'll be sitting up here, and she's going to have to control me. So if you tune in next week and you see her, or 2 weeks and see her here in the chair, I want to get used to sitting back in the council chair anyway. Those were the those were the comments that I had under the public comment period. We'll now move to oral communication and allow people to speak on items that are not on the agenda tonight, or if you don't think you can remain here and do want to speak on something on the agenda later on, you can speak at this time, but we won't allow you to speak then when the item comes up at the time of the regular calling of that issue. So this is the time where you can speak, or your only opportunity to speak for any items on the consent calendar. And with that, we'll open the public communication period. Is there anyone that wants to speak on any topic, either on the consent calendar or any topic of general city business? Seeing no one rise, we'll close that one. That's a first, too. I don't know where to go from here. I'm lost. We know that has never happened before. Okay, we'll now go to the consent calendar. There are 2 items there that are routine, and we generally take those as one motion. What are the wishes of the council? Bob?
Mr. Mayor, before we make a motion to approve or that, I'd like to get some clarification on one of the items on the consent calendar. It was under oral communications, number 5. It was when firefighter Kyle Dodd stood up and asked for the information on the request for proposal with the merger for the county and the city. Your response to him was that it was going to be brought up at a future workshop. Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, I felt that was inappropriate because I had made a request, a council request, at a prior meeting for it to be agendized. This was prior to us making a change in the policy. I felt that my request should have been honored, and if you do not feel it should have been honored, then I will make a similar request at council request at the end of this meeting. I just felt it was inappropriate that it was not honored, and I just want to make that as a public record.
Thank you, Mr. Lingle. Are there any comments regarding the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you.
I second.
Moved and seconded. Let's vote. Mr. Lingle, I will comment on your request. We have had very loose policies in the past in which sometimes we honored a request if one member brought it up, such as you did. Sometimes we didn't. I can remember issues. Councilman Holmdahl proposed that we consider changing the name of the city, and there was no second on that. All he asked for was it be put on the agenda for the future, and the 4 of us felt that it was not warranted. It was not warranted. The staff time and the other things were not warranted on that to discuss it, so we invoked the procedure. I made a motion right after the failure of the last ballot measure to increase revenue for the city, and that we could put it on the agenda for the future to discuss it, and no one seconded it at that time, and the issue was dropped. So we've never formally decided. You've made the request, but unless this is something that will require quite a bit of staff time to put together a request for proposal, and it's a very significant event in the city. And before we put the staff time together, I'd like to see us see whether
Mr. Mayor, I
there is a second. If there is a second to your motion tonight to put it on the agenda, we'll ask staff to put it on the agenda.
And I understand your concern. I just wish it had been made known at the time when I made that request. If there was no interest, we could have dropped it. But you didn't make that known at the time. I was under full assumption that my request was being honored until 2 weeks later at the next council meeting, and it was, well, it was upsetting. Thank you.
Okay, I apologize for that. Do we have a...
Mr. Mayor, I would like to comment further on this issue. I think that we have been inconsistent. I think at times we have allowed one council member to make a request, at other times we haven't. And that inconsistency does not go well, go well with council members, it does not go well with the public. So that needs to be made very clear from now on, whether we will have, whether even before next time, let's make it clear right now, even during this council meeting, are we going to require a second? I just made a motion a little bit, I just made a request a while ago and it did have a second. So let's make it, for the sake of, from this moment on, what are we going to do? Are we going to have one council member be allowed to make a request, or are we requiring a second? My understanding, since I've been in this council, that it was only one member, one council member that was required. That was my understanding. I could have been misinformed, but that was my understanding.
Okay, well, I remember the two examples I cited were instances where Mayor DeWeese sat in this chair, and he ruled that without a second, the item dropped.
Mr. Mayor, I would suggest that because we're having so much discussion on this item, which is actually a consent agenda on the minutes, I would suggest you just, at your next meeting, have an item added to the agenda that says discussion about this matter.
Right.
Thank you. We already have said we're going to discuss it at the workshop, which is at the next meeting, and establish the policy. So, and it was put on there because it has been confusing, Councilman Martin.
Okay, what happens at for the remaining of this meeting?
For the remainder of this meeting, if there's a
Can I
recommendation.
address that? Mr. Mayor, could I address that, please? I spoke with Mr. Pannoni this afternoon, and actually, it's in the council handbook right now, somewhat vague but pretty clear, that the city clerk works at the discretion of the city council, She does not work at the discretion of a single council member. So based on that, after discussion with the city attorney, it is appropriate that not a single council member make a request. It is appropriate that we have at least another council member do it. So maybe it's not even needed, we don't even need to address it at the council meeting, at the city workshop. Is that your understanding, Mr. Pannoni?
Through the mayor, based on the way the code is written, it would take 3 council members to direct the city administrator to put anything, or the city clerk to put anything on the agenda, because the way the code is written.
3, okay. I think this ought to be discussed, because I can see a situation where a minority view could be shut out, and I don't want to do that. I would like to allow minority view on the council be able to request something and come forward. So let's leave it as an agenda item, if you all agree with me. It's not on the agenda for discussion tonight. Let's leave it as an agenda item for our workshop, which is the next time we meet, 2 weeks, and we'll discuss the options at that time. We have a motion to approve the consent calendar. Did we already vote on that, Donna?
It was voted on.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I need coffee. give you the gavel tonight. New business. Item 4, it's an oversight committee for Park Maintenance and Pool Assessment District. Is Dan McCaffrey here?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council, those in our audience, those viewing public at home, and my fellow staff members. Tonight, I have the recommendation of the Oversight Committee, made up of Mr. Bob Kennedy, our chair, Ms. Patty Coggins, Mr. Ron Fink, and Mr. Ken Ostini. A little background on what we're doing tonight. The City of Lompoc Park and Pool Maintenance Assessment District, we bring before you every year. And tonight, you're going to be having the consideration of review and approval of the statement for the period of July 1, 2008 through June 30, 2009. A little history. In the spring of 2002, the city developed a proposed assessment for funding a portion of the cost of the Lompoc Aquatic Center, park improvements, and other park recreation maintenance services. City property owners supported the assessment ballot, and the council approved and levied the assessments. In May of 2003, council adopted resolution number 5092, para 03, establishing the Park Maintenance and City Pool Assessment District 2002-01 Oversight Committee to monitor the expenditures of funds of the assessment district and to report to City Council on an annual basis by any findings and/or recommendations. The City Council annually directs the consulting assessment engineer to prepare an engineer's report for the fiscal year. The engineer's report includes the proposed assessment budget and the updated assessments for each parcel in the city. At the conclusion of each fiscal year, the city's finance department compiles the Parks and Pool Maintenance Assessment District Statement of Revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances, which is then reviewed by the Oversight Committee to ensure that all the funds of the Park Maintenance and City Pool Assessment District were spent as intended. This year, the Oversight Committee, well, actually, I guess I can say last year, but the Oversight Committee met on October 27th of 2009 to review the assessment district statement for the period of July 1, 2008 through June 30, 2009. In your staff report packets, the minutes are attached for your review, and they reflect the activity and the actions of that meeting. On December 9th, 2009, the committee met to make recommendation to approve the annual park maintenance and pool assessment budget and expenditures for the period of July 1, 2008 through June 30, 2009, as presented and clarified at the meeting of October 27, 2009. It is recommended that the council review and approve the City of Lompoc Parks Park, Pool, and Maintenance Assessment District Statement of Revenues, Expenditures, and Changes in the fund balances for the period of July 1, 2008 through June 30, 2009. That concludes my report. I'm available for questions as well. Brad Wilkie with our City Finance Department is here as well to answer any questions. Thank you.
You hold just a second. Sure. While you have it. No, Dan, while we see if we have council questions, Mr. Lingle does have a question.
Mr. McCafferty, I was at the meeting when you did the presentation, and I don't want to use the word riddle, but there were numerous errors in the initial report. And fortunately, the errors were corrected now, and we have a pretty comprehensive report that you feel is accurate. I'm just wondering, because we rely heavily on the staff reports for accuracy, is there anything can be done in the future to make sure that that number of errors will not be present? I mean, I'd say there's probably a half dozen or more errors in the report.
Are you talking about the balanced fund sheet, sir?
Yes.
Well, we're working very closely with finance, and of course, we work closely with our consultant firm to make sure those things don't happen. Granted, unfortunately, they did, but they were caught. And of course, we will continue to work closely with the consultant firm and Finance to make sure that this time next year, when I come before you, we won't have to be worried about that concern.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Rouget.
I was at that meeting also, and I know Mr. Fink went through all the line items, and I thought the answer is probably going to be for next year, but I thought you had decided to itemize, because he was saying, well, you have this much money, and this has how much was spent, what happened to the rest of it, and I thought, there was going to be footnotes at the bottom on those. Is that for next year?
That is for next year, was
Okay.
my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
And Councilwoman Martner.
I was not at the meeting, but I read the minutes. Now, and this is perhaps picky, but were there errors or were just the way the monies were reported? I mean, my impression from reading at the minutes is just that the monies were not reported in a way that was very specific. So is it that is it actually an error, or is it just that it was not reported in the right way? And do you understand the difference?
I do, and thank you for your comment, and that probably adds more clarification. There were a couple in the balance sheet, there were a couple errors, numeral errors, but for the most part, it was more for clarification purposes that there was a lack of understanding.
Okay, thank you.
We'll open thank you, Dan. We'll open the item to public comment. At this time, is there anyone for the public that would like to speak on the item before us? Seeing no one rise, we'll bring it back to the council. Are there any other comments, or what are the wishes of the council? Councilman Martner.
I would like to make a motion that we accept the report. I see that there's been a fair amount of scrutiny on the part of the Oversight Committee, so I trust that this is quite an accurate report by now. So I would move that we accept the staff report.
Thank you. The recommendation of staff, and it may be semantics, is that we review and approve the report and not accept.
I make a motion that we approve the
Okay,
report.
thank you. Mr. Durham.
I agree with Councilman Martner. I think it's a very thorough report. It shows where the mistakes were made. It shows what staff did to correct those reports. And again, I agree that they were minor. Luckily, they were caught when they were. So I make a motion. I second the motion from Councilman Martner.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor and a second.
Could I make a comment real quick?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Ms. Martner made the comment as well, and I'd also like to commend the Oversight Committee for the work that they did on it. I think they did a fantastic job, so I want to thank them.
Thank you. Okay, now let's vote. This item approved unanimously. We've been we've been at it since 6 o'clock. Should we take a 10-minute break before we start the next item? Okay, we're going to break for 10 minutes. Try to hold it to that. We'll be back here then.
Hello, Mary.
Okay, microphone's back on. Back in session. The next item on the agenda is the proposed imposition of terms and conditions of employment on the Lompoc Police Officers Association bargaining unit. Laurel? You? Yeah. Paul and Bill? Mr. Udonis.
Honorable Mayor and members of City Council, what you have before you is staff's recommendation on implementing the terms and conditions for 1 year on the Lompoc Police Officers Association. This is consistent with the Myers-Milius-Brown Act. You have under discussion, I've listed all the dates that the parties met and conferred. I have the dates that the parties, that the city provided the OPOA with written proposals. Under the salaries and compensation, back in June, I think it was initially in May or June of last year, we had proposed a 5% reduction or furloughs. That is still the same proposal we have on the table today. If you look down at the second paragraph, because of the time element, what we're looking at now is a contract that would span 09, 010, June of 09, June of 010. Because 6 months have gone, in order to recapture the same amount that we initially proposed, it would be a 10.769 change or reduction. The important thing to remember, though, that in terms of whether it was furloughs or wage reductions, it's the same as we proposed, or excuse me, as we negotiated with the Teamsters, the same that we negotiated with the firefighters, and it's also the same that has been implemented on all the other employee groups in the city. On the health and welfare, again, what we did was we proposed that we do away with the old language in the contract that provided for the city picking up 75% of the first 12%, and then after that, it would be a 50-50 split on any premium increases. The city proposed doing away with that. That again is consistent with what we've done with the other bargaining units and all the other employee groups. The dental, and that, I'm sorry, that's the increase for both health and dental benefits. On the dental, the city proposed a 50-50 split on the dental payments, the dental premiums. Because again, the city is obligated during negotiations to maintain the status quo. For the first 6 months from June to December, we paid those premiums. So what the city is proposing is that for the second 6 months from January to June, that the employees pick up the entire dental premium because it was a 50-50 split. Then beginning in June 2010, we would go back to the 50-50 split. And again, the bottom line, how it comes out is that's the same amount, the same change that we've made with the other bargaining units and all other employee groups. We're proposing that sick leave, except for doctor's appointments that require a partial day's absence, shall not be counted as time worked for the purposes of overtime calculation. Right now, or for a long time, what the city had done was if somebody was out sick, that time counted toward overtime calculation. And we've included, particularly because we're going to be reopening the agreements, or we have a limited reopening with the Teamsters. We're giving the groups a most favored nations clause. And this terms would expire on June 20, 2010. That completes my report. I would request that council approve the report as it's submitted, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the members of the council at this time, or any comments? Your request, Mr. Yanonis, was that we approve the report. Isn't your request also that we adopt a resolution?
Correct. I'm sorry. Yes.
5601. Okay. Those are the. Thank you. Seeing no questions at this time from the council, I'll open the public comment period and invite anyone that wants to speak to us to come to the podium.
I'm Brian Dillard, the president of the Lompoc Police Officers Association, or the LPOA as we're currently known. Honorable Mayor, City Council members, and members of the public. It is my distinct honor to address you this evening on behalf of the membership of the LPOA in an effort to convey our serious concerns regarding the imposition of terms and conditions of employment upon the LPOA bargaining unit as recommended to you by the city's chief negotiator, Mr. Bill Yononis. We've been in negotiations with the city now for over a year and now find ourselves at impasse with the city regarding terms and conditions required by the city during the current economic situation. As you know, the city has demanded a 5% salary decrease of all employees. Initially, we were asked to give up all paid holidays as a means of achieving these savings. The LPOA took exception to this proposal as we simply are not allowed to take a day off during a given holiday. Other city employees can simply take that day off, that time off, and spend it with their families, while a number of our employees would have to work the holiday without any compensation. As the need for our services never seems to go away and actually increases during most of these holidays. Then the suggestion came for work furloughs. The city required 104 hours of furloughs from each employee to reach the designated savings goal. It is easy to order an office worker to take a furlough or simply to close an office for a couple of times a month. This is just merely an inconvenience to the public at large. However, we can't simply close down like other departments, and although we would certainly be forced to schedule out our furloughs where they would be enacted for manning purposes, I can guarantee you that there would be times when overtime would have to be paid to cover for manning issues, manning shortages caused by other factors coupled with the furloughs. There is a minimum manning standard for each shift that requires a minimum number of officers at any given time. This number is not negotiable. Deviation from the number of officers available for duty not only creates a severe safety issue for the officers, but also, more importantly, puts the citizens we're sworn to protect in greater danger. In short, a scheduled furlough day for a junior officer that runs in conjunction with the illness or injury or scheduled training, vacation, etc. of another officer could result in a more senior officer being ordered to work on overtime, negating the cost savings measures of the furloughs. In this scenario, you could possibly be paying a top step agent time and a half to cover a junior officer's position while he or she is off on their scheduled furlough. Now, I'm not an economic genius, but even I can see that that doesn't pass the common sense test. We countered the furloughs with an option that we believe would meet the requirements of the city and be less damaging to us. In this proposal, we would be allowed to bank our holiday pay throughout the year. That's 96 hours, and have the option to give back to the city, give it back to the city at the end of the year. Furthermore, each member of the department of the POA would be then required to perform one 8-hour furlough day during the year, thus meeting the city's goal of 104 hours of savings. This proposal was turned down by the city with the reasoning that funds to pay for used to pay this out, cash out the holiday cash outs were paid through a reserve fund and therefore not forecasted by the city and could not be shown as a savings for the city. This despite the fact that the city's initial proposal was to take our holiday pay. Chief Dabney even offered to leave a vacant sergeant's position open within our department for the duration of the budget. Total compensation package matched the city's overall savings goal per bargaining unit. Chief Dabney offered this to the city and asked that they accept it in lieu of the 5% per employees. The city, while more than willing to take this measure, still required 5% per employees. Ultimately, the chief pulled that from the table. The LPOA believes that the reason for this decision is due to the fact the city bestowed what is known as the most favored nation agreement to other bargaining units, essentially making it commonly known, essentially this is commonly known as the Me Too clause, which with the city basically agrees to provide terms and conditions to one bargaining unit if it is similar or better conditions are later extended to another bargaining unit. This breeds an environment. I understand.
Okay.
Can I wrap up?
If you will, please.
Mr. Mayor, I will respectfully request that we allow the time, because this is a grave matter, and I think it's probably just a couple of minutes. It's a request that I'd like to make if we can go over the few minutes, if need be, because it is a grave matter. It's just a request. Thank you.
That's the rest of the council. Okay. I agree. Continue.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Back to the most favored nations. This breeds an environment that makes it virtually impossible to enter or to proceed with negotiations in good faith, as nearly every option offered to the city by a bargaining unit may be declined in fear of having to extend similar options to the other units or who have already settled their negotiations with the city. Of course, this is rarely stated by the city as the reason why an option presented by a bargaining unit is declined. That, by definition, of course, could be considered bad faith bargaining. There's no reason why we of the LPOA should be punished as outlined in Mr. Yononis' proposal, recommending a imposition of nearly 11% salary cut for the next 6 months, merely exercising our rights to bargain for a better contract through the negotiation, impasse, and mediation process. We have bargained in good faith throughout the process and should not be punished for exercising our rights. According to the city's own salary survey, the LPOA is approximately 26% behind salary benefits. By imposing a nearly 11% salary decrease for the next 6 months, coupled with the increase of our health benefits that we'll have to pick up as outlined in Mr. Yononis' proposal, we will be approximately 40% behind for the next 6 months, then dropping to 35% behind. That's not even considering where we'll be this time next year if our health cost increases go up another 10%, which they traditionally do. In all this together, adding all this together, not only will it be harder to attract quality employment candidates in the future, but it will be nearly impossible to retain those that we have in all ranks and positions currently. My mission tonight was not to come and point fingers at the council, the city negotiator, but merely to provide the LPOA's side of the ongoing negotiation with the city. It is our sincere hope that you, as members of the City Council, will consider all sides and options while deciding whether or not to impose a labor contract on us. However, I do ask that you shelve Mr. Yononis' current recommendation and direct him back to the negotiation table. I thank you for your ongoing service to the community of Lompoc, and I thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Dillard. Next speaker.
I'm Augustine Arias. I'm a citizen here at Lompoc. I grew up in Lompoc. I'm a police officer here at Lompoc. I'm currently assigned as a patrol agent. I've been part of these negotiations for the last 2 or 3 negotiations. First, it was a problem that we were complaining about the guy that we hired, so we got rid of that guy. We bring in another guy. Same treatment, same disrespect, same lack of bargaining, so we get rid of him. The only thing you left us to do is lawyers. If there's one thing that cops don't like, other than criminals, is lawyers. But what other options do we have? For the last 6 years, the average of what we've gotten isn't even the cost of living that the government sets out every year. For the last 6 years, that's what we've gotten. What have we done since? We don't stop working. We work our butts off. Ask the family of the little kid that got killed in January of last year if they're not happy today and they can't rest a little easier because of the hard work that we put every day, put 3 guys behind bars for that. We have captains and chief that support us. Chief comes up with options that you guys probably didn't even know about. Trying to get so that we won't take it out on my employees. That's the type of chief we have. We have captains that back up sergeants that tell us what we need to do, and we go out and we do our job diligently. You don't see, 4 of us standing around doing nothing. Yeah, we take a coffee break from time to time. We sit at city council meetings to try to make sure that our stuff's not going to get ruined. But hey, we still work our butts off for you. That's what we signed up for. We didn't ask you guys to put us in a tan and green uniform. We're not sitting here saying, oh, we're all the same. Ask my wife, who stays home with my 4 kids, if it's all the same when I call her and tell her, hey, today I had bullets fly by my head. Ask her that. You told me. It's all the same. It's all the same. We're going to treat everybody the same. That's why it's not the same. Because I'm sitting there with another officer who has 2 daughters and we're seeing bullets fly by our heads and we're ducking for cover so we don't take one in the grape. That's why it's not the same. We don't have a fancy jacket or we're going to come and say, oh, we need to all be treated equally. This job isn't equal. It ain't equal on the emotions you spend. It ain't equal on the fact that every day I come to work, I may not go home. That became clearly evident to me New Year's Eve. At least I had the holiday to bank that day, though, because they wanted to take that too. I was at work on a holiday. My kids were at home. Yeah, I'm getting there.
Good.
I'm sorry if I'm wasting your time. But I'm a little emotional about this, and I apologize. I'm not going to sit there and sit there after I've recruited all these good guys back here to stay here and work here and sit here and watch them keep taking a knife in the back every time. Why does the fire department want to leave Lompoc? It's clearly obvious. We don't want to leave Lompoc, though. We want to keep working here. We want to have good terms. And that can all be accomplished. It's accomplished across the hallway. As soon as we walk in here, there's a problem here. I think we're kidding ourselves if we don't know what that problem is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arias. Donna, put it, turn it back on for the rest.
Hello there. I'm Ron Hutchins. I've been with the police department for almost 34 years full-time. 18 months prior to that as a reserve officer. I was born and raised in this town. And I, just speaking for myself, am just a 2-week notice away from retirement. And I can tell your hatchet man here what he can do with this 10% cut. These other guys back here, they're not in that position. They have to take whatever you give them. And I don't feel they should have to do that. Chip said it the best. We're not the same. I was up there the other day, what he's talking about, when the guy went crazy up on West Willow, shooting at his wife and shooting at anybody that came around. We're just lucky that it happened during the daytime. And we had all our detectives went up there, the chief, the captain, the training sergeant, all of them went up there to help. It's not the same. And I probably won't put in my resignation to retire. I'll take it with the rest of the guys. But, and some people said, you know, you better be careful, you're going to make them angry. Back in 1968, just before I went to Vietnam, they said the same thing, don't make them angry. And we all said, what are you going to do? Shave our head and send us to Nam? Because we knew that was coming. So basically it's the same thing. You know, Dick DeWeese came to our association seeking our nomination at the last elections. And he came in and he says, I'd like your support, he says, but I know I'm not going to get it. And the same thing here. I personally feel I'm wasting my time. I think you've already made up your minds. You're going to accept whatever he says. I'd like to see you prove us wrong. And then you can say, hey, I told you so, and I'll apologize. But that's a big hit. That's a big hit. These youngsters, all of them got a lot of new kids, and they all got high mortgages and stuff to pay for. I've been around a little while. My kids are grown and gone. My house is just about there. Like I said, I'm in an enviable position. I can say, see ya. Give me what I got coming and I'm out of here. And if I did upset you, I'm sorry. But prove me wrong. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else?
Good evening, Mayor, member of the council, Ralph Harmon, Lompoc. First, I'd just like to commend the police department. I don't know if anybody else has noticed, but I've been around town for quite a while, that we've had some major crimes that have occurred relatively recently, and also those crimes were quickly solved. I can remember a few years back when we had some major crimes that went on for months and months and months, and they weren't solved. Somehow, our police department now is able to do that, and I think we need to commend them more than once. Now, I just finished reading a book about the New York bomb squad. In that, the whole primary focus of their work was on focus. They insist that their men stay focused on what they're doing. I think this is very critical for all of our police officers here too, that they need to stay focused on what they're doing for their own safety and for the safety of the residents of Lompoc. When they have to get involved in long, drawn-out negotiations, they're not staying focused. They can't be. They have families, they have homes, they have cars, they have all of those things that everybody else in the community has too, but they are now in the jeopardy of losing those because money is being taken away from them or not being provided at the level it should be. I looked out here and I see a lot of young police officers. Some of them, I'm sorry, I don't know their names. They're obviously newer recruits. I think what we're going to see is more of an exodus of our police officers to surrounding communities where the pay is higher, the benefits are higher. And when we do, we're going to have an influx of much younger officers who don't know the city as well as those experienced officers. We need to pay for those experienced officers. We need their experience. If we want to keep the crime rate down, we want the city to grow properly, we want to have economic benefits in this community, and we want to attract employers, we need to treat our police officers properly. Everyone up here, except Mr. Durham, made promises about public safety in their campaigns. I don't think you have honored those promises. I think you need to go back to the negotiating table, honor what these gentlemen need, and that's proper wages. Thank you.
City Council and Mayor, I appreciate your time. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to us tonight and state that in tonight's meeting, I am not envious of your current position. The decision to cut the lifeblood of the people who protect the taxpayers and the voters of the city of Lompoc is something that I would never be able to impose. As the spouse of a current Lompoc Police Department detective and a fellow police officer in San Luis Obispo County, I am very aware of the day-to-day struggles that the men and women in blue have. I also know that Lompoc has some of the most severe struggles in the San Luis and Santa Barbara counties. Per capita, Lompoc is amongst the leaders in several violent felonies against people. The officers of Lompoc Police Department have found ways to professionally deal with these problems on a day-to-day basis in order to keep the residents of Lompoc safe. Choosing to cut the salaries of officers that are already amongst some of the lowest paid in San Luis and Santa Barbara counties would be a devastating decision. By slashing the feeble salaries of the hardworking police department, you would inevitably cause many officers to seek employment elsewhere. This would leave two significant problems for the city of Lompoc. The first problem would result in younger, inexperienced officers taking the streets, officers who have to deal with the severe problems on day-to-day patrol. As a fellow officer and someone who was once referred to as the new guy, I know these academy graduates and officers will eventually be able to handle the crime in the city, but it may take them 10 to 15 years to handle these cases as efficiently and as effectively as current veterans of the Lompoc Police Department do every day. The second main challenge you'd be facing is that who would be responsible for training these new officers? I know very well that when I graduated academy, I knew very little about what it took to be an effective police officer. And through field training programs, I was able to learn the job. It has taken me a constant of teaching, training, and mentoring to help me understand how to do this job properly. Now that I've been on the force for some time, I still constantly rely on the training and the experience of veteran officers to help me succeed in my daily duties. The questions need to be asked: who will these younger officers look to if all the veterans are gone? All cities in today's society face uncertain and unstable times. The time has come where new revenue sources need to be sought out to avoid an untimely demise of a police department that has strived so hard to keep the citizens of Lompoc safe. By choosing to impose a salary reduction, you would be placing the community at greater risk, causing great officers to go elsewhere in order to provide for their families. This is not a cost savings to the city. By doing this, crime will inevitably go up. Citizens will not be protected the way they currently are.
The request of the Lompoc Police Department is not to be the highest paid in all of the state of California. It is just to be fairly paid. I believe this clearly shows their intention to assist the city through their hard times. The question is the city willing to assist the police department, the people they count on at night to keep them safe, the people who defend and protect the taxpayers, the people that persevere through the struggles, through these hard financial times? In closing, I would again just like to thank you for your time and state that the choice you make tonight has the ability to affect the city of Lompoc for at least the next 10 to 15 years.
No, I didn't ask you for your name at the.
My name is Matt Honorud.
Matt.
Honorud.
Hi, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Chuck Strange. Many of you know me. I've been with the Lompoc Police Department since 1987, currently at the rank of sergeant. I've had the, I guess, pleasure is, for lack of a better term, of serving as the LPOA president, which is currently occupied by Brian Dillard, and also sitting at the table during negotiations, both of them involving Mr. Yanonis. I'd like to say right now that historically the LPOA has asked for nothing extraordinary. All we've asked for is reciprocity with neighboring law enforcement agencies. I'm not here to talk about the tone or the character of the current negotiations. I'm here to just kind of put a face to the financial part of it. And I'm not a financial wizard like Brian, but I went to somebody who is. And I said, hey, realistically, if this were to be imposed at a top step sergeant's pay, what am I looking at? And generally around $720, $25 a month pay cut. That's a month. That would create an almost unbearable financial hardship on many of the officers currently working at this agency, including myself. And that's something to take seriously. I believe it was Ralph Emerson that said, 1,000 forests can be found in one acorn. And this is your acorn. And the decision you make here tonight as to how you proceed with this huge issue can dictate the future of this agency, the direction it's going to go, and the relationship that you have with it. I'd like to thank you.
I didn't come here expecting to speak on this issue at all tonight, but people have been very articulate. I've worked in the computer field for a number of years. Oh, name, Anita Friedman. I'm a citizen of Lompoc. And back to, in computer systems, safety requirements are very important. If you don't have safety, none of the rest of it's going to work. If we don't have safety as citizens here in this town, none of the rest of it's going to work. So therefore, safety first. As far as specifics, everybody else who's spoken has very articulately covered everything. And so I wish to say, as a private citizen who does not have a connection with the police or police department, I supported them very strongly. And I will repeat from earlier, grant to all those here tonight such wisdom, understanding, and resolve that they may make the best decisions to lead our city in justice and righteousness.
Let me introduce myself. It's been a while since I've been here. I'm not sure all of you remember me, but I'm Lynn Swenson. I am the principal officer for the Teamsters, but I'm also a citizen of Lompoc for some 30 plus years. And primarily what I want to address is the favored nations. It is a concept in labor negotiations that is used to bring about some equality. Early on in negotiations, I approached my membership and proposed the very thing that is here tonight, that if we don't come to an agreement, the city council will decide what your labor contract is. The city council will decide what poison you take. and when you take it. So early on, we agreed to the favor nations, and we made some hard choices and some things that were not pleasant for the membership. But by taking it early on, it eased the pain. One of the very fortunate things the City Council did for us was the furlough days. Rather than 8 hours, moving to 4 hours. Well, that's the advantage to having the insight to look to say, let's do it now, let's put it in place, rather than waiting under the Brown Act to when the city can move and impose it. Because you lose your ability to negotiate. You lose your ability to maneuver the out-of-control freight train or freighter that is wandering around. So that's the advantage to sitting down and looking at it early and making some hard choices. Our contract is not the same as the fire contract. They made different choices. So to say it alleviates the ability to collectively bargain simply is not true. What the fire settled for is far different than what the Teamsters settled for. And there's always that window of opportunity to negotiate, to maneuver and move, but you do have to make hard choices. And the earlier you pick them, sometimes the easier it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swenson. I said thank you. No.
John Lawrence, City of Lompoc, Mr. Mayor and City Council members, we're sorry to see that the city has reached this point in its negotiations with our public safety personnel. Public safety should be primarily concern of all the citizens of Lompoc, not just the City Council. And I realize that we are in tough economic times and that there has to be some cuts in the salaries of all the employees, but I think that public safety should have received less of a cut than other departments. As far as making retroactive this cut to the police department's funding, I think that that should be negated, and we start from this point and they only are subjected to a 5% discount or 5% reduction in pay. Thank you very much.
Hello, Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Adrienne Boyd. I'm the Chief Steward for the City Teamsters Local 381 that represents City of Lompoc employees. There's been a lot said tonight about the police officers' contract. I just wanted to add a couple of things. During the budget hearings, the one fact that keeps ringing in my mind is that the time John Walk was acting finance director, he made a point that 85% of the salaries paid out of the general fund come from public safety. And this is not an easy decision for the council to make. It's not an easy decision for those employees infected by it here, but 85% of the salaries come out of public safety. If the city does not make some kind of concessions, some kind of reductions in those salaries, the city's financial health is going to be much, much worse than it is now. We'll see a total cut in services, not only in law enforcement, fire safety, it'll be in other public services that the citizens of Lompoc have come to rely on and count on for many, many years. Some of those services earn the city revenue. So by having less people that can put out the effort that are performing those jobs on a day-to-day basis, we also cut the city's ability to make revenue. A couple of things I want to say that I know we've heard a lot about law enforcement is a little different. You know, part of the word that is different is the fact that it did take them, they had a very long, grueling negotiating process and were unable to come to a decision. So at this point, we're looking at an entirely different situation than we were looking at a year ago. As far as the favored nations go, I mean, there's a part of me that wants to stand up here and say, no, do not approve this contract because it benefits the employees that I represent. But I'm also looking down the road and can see that if we do not do something in all bargaining groups, including management, fire, police, Teamsters, and those unrepresented employees, I'm afraid that in a year, 6 months from now, 3 months from now, the city is going to be looking at a much harsher financial situation. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. Nick?
Hi, everybody. My name is Phil Dolman. I've been with the police department for about 5 years.
And I just wanted to point out something that I noticed from sitting back there. I don't know if anyone else caught it. The gentleman from the Teamsters mentioned how had we have come to an agreement or taken whatever the initial offer was, we would be able to maneuver the freight train more. And I don't know if you remembered, Sergeant Dillard clearly laid out that all those options, the furlough days and everything else he talked about, that's not an option for us. Sergeant Dillard clearly laid that out. And the other thing I wanted to point out, like Agent Arias and a few other citizens mentioned, is I'm a perfect example of the officer that you need to worry about leaving. Not that I should preface that by saying I'm in no way looking for another job or am even thinking about it. What keeps me at the police department is our leadership and the family atmosphere, but there is a breaking point when it comes to salary. I don't know what it is yet. We're not there, but I'm sure we will get there. If I could see that I can drive 25 minutes to Santa Maria and make $9, $10 more an hour, at some point my work and family, I have to make a choice there. Just a little background on you of an example of what you've been losing. I've been on for 5 years. Most of you probably recognize me from the TV show. I deal with the community all the time. I actually looked up my stats very recently. Even though I've been sitting behind the desk for the last two and a half years, I've made close to 600 arrests. Over 100 of them are narcotics related. I have over 30 DUIs. I've solved numerous persons and property crimes. I have a bachelor's degree. I'm working on my master's degree. And I just think that I'd be a poster child for what they're talking about as the officer you have to worry about leaving. But like I said, pay's not that important. The atmosphere I have at work is more important, but there is a breaking point. Because like everybody said, I have a mortgage and everything else to pay for. And then you got to bring some new guy in, and not only is he replacing my experience, I'm not there to train him. You have somebody that's training them, doing the best they can. Granted, they're put in that position. They've only been on for 2 years or maybe 3 years. And their problem is they didn't learn from someone else that had a lot of experience. My FTOs are, 2 of them are sergeants, and one of them is an agent, and they both had detective experience and everything by the time I got trained on it. And I am sure that encompassed with my hard work is one of the main reasons why I feel comfortable handling any type of investigation right now. I know I could do that, but the trickle effect is pretty obvious when it comes to training and cycling people in and out. I just wanted to point that out and also point out how we couldn't have agreed to what was mentioned for the obvious reasons that Sergeant Dillard eloquently laid out earlier. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm Mary Saladino. I have been a resident of Lompoc for 45 years or more, and I have enjoyed the comfort of safety thanks to our police department and to our fire department and to our council members and our mayors. Thank you all. What I wanted to say is crime is unpredictable, and so are fires unpredictable. And these factors should be considered, as they cannot be equal to services that are reasonably predictable. And I'm sure you have had to deal with all kinds of details that I have no idea what they are. But at the same time, the bottom line is that these experienced officers and firemen who are members of our community and love our community and want to keep our community safe still have to be able to survive. And if I understood that earlier speaker correctly, I thought he said his pay was around $725 a month? Less. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well, that's a chunk. My gosh. Well, anyway, please consider the cost of rehiring, retraining, and remember the value of what we have and honor it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Saladino.
Council. My name is Frank Young. I'm a citizen of Lompoc, and to me it's, and I worked for a number of years at Vandenberg with rocket science, and this ain't rocket science. If I have to carry my own garbage to the dump, that's fine with me as long as I can do it safely. Thank you very much.
Do you have any other comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Would
City
you mind telling
Council,
us who you are?
I will tell you who I am. My name is Tim Dabney. I have the pleasure of serving as the Chief of Police of this fine organization. And I'm very proud of the men and women that you see in the back of the room. And, you know, I've heard them make comments this evening, very valid points. I've heard them passionately speak about these issues, and they've been respectful in their comments. I just wanted to bring some things to your attention in support of them as you ponder this decision you have to make. Our mission is clearly stated in our manuals on the walls of the police department, that our mission is to provide effective and professional police services in partnership with the citizens we serve, and in partnership and encouraging mutual respect and innovative problem solving, thereby improving the quality of life in our community. But that partnership is also with other people in the city. And no disrespect to my friends for the Teamsters, but I agree with Officer Hutchins when he says that certain occupations are just not treated the same. I don't expect that my surgeon should receive the same wages as a gardener. It just doesn't make practical sense. In the last few weeks, while most of the Lompoc was focused on families and the holidays, the men and women of the Lompoc Police Department faithfully pursued their mission in taking care of our community. Guns were taken off the street, large amounts of methamphetamine destined for distribution in Lompoc were seized, violent felons were arrested and charged. Our investigative unit completed lengthy, difficult, and detailed investigations with fruitful outcomes in several cases, including the aforementioned homicide of a 14-year-old resident last January and recent robbery cases. Last week, as mentioned previously, patrol officers calmly resolved a life-threatening active shooter situation which otherwise could have had tragic results. And had you been out there at the scene, you'd have known what Chip was passionately speaking about. It was an active shooter that could have had very tragic results on either side. The restraint and professionalism displayed by our officers in this situation made me proud to be a part of the Lompoc Police Department. And many other departments, without that experience and expertise, where cooler heads prevailed, you could have had an officer-involved shooting. My mandate as your chief of police is that I direct your staff to deliver the highest level of police services possible to the residents of our community. I'm compelled to seek out the tools, resources, and staff necessary to accomplish that mandate. And as the storms of economic crisis loomed over a year ago, and we had our preliminary budget meetings, I urged the council to see the upcoming crisis as an opportunity to move forward in our efforts to make Lompoc more fertile for new business and economic development by providing the resources to improve our community while our competitors in other jurisdictions were cutting back. The thought being that we would be ready for growth while other communities were rebuilding when the economy improved. The members of the Lompoc Police Department have caught that vision and continue to take action to improve our community by enhancing crime prevention and education, reducing graffiti, engaging the community, apprehending criminals, and having the foresight to intervene before crises occur. We have written grants providing additional resources to leverage our prevention efforts and response to criminal gang activity, sex offender tracking, violence against women, drug enforcement activities, drunk and illegal driving, as well as promoting programs for youth and citizen involvement. In short, this department and these men and women have maximized the resources that we've been given and found new ways to deliver those services to benefit our public. But some of the key elements as mentioned tonight to an effective police agency are recruitment, training, and retention of expertise. The department has been diligent in hiring the most talented and qualified staff available and has invested a tremendous amount of training to achieve a level of professional expertise that is exemplary to others in our profession. The men and women of the Lompoc Police Department have taken up the challenge of their oath seriously and apply themselves daily to the betterment of those we are sworn to serve. However, retention of that training and expertise has historically been a challenge for our city. Most, if not all, members of the Lompoc Police Department realize that they may never see themselves at the top rung of the compensation in our profession. What they do hope for is reasonable parity with the agencies around them. And I've made two promises openly to my staff and publicly, and they are to take care of our town and to take care of our people. I cannot speak for you as the City Council. I cannot speak, nor can I speak for the Lompoc Police Officers Association. I'm stuck between you. I can only pose this question. Is this action tonight in the best interest of our community and considerate of our staff?
Thank you, Chief. Is there anyone else at this time that would like to speak? Seeing no one rise, we'll close public comment period and bring it back to the council. Is there any who wants to go first? Ann?
I really hate this. I've been in this seat for 3 years, and I hate this. Is the part about being here, the negotiations. It's a big game. It's a game. And in looking over the past, there have been 12 meetings over a whole year to get this thing settled. And I know you called in a law firm, and they're even playing hardball with us. I wish we could come together on this. We have to think about the whole city. We're in a big bind financially, and this year it's even going to be worse. And if this was taken care of 6 months ago, 9 months ago, we wouldn't be here in this position. That's all I'm going to say right now.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to come? Tony?
You know, I'm going to ask the attorney to keep an ear open, because if I say something or start to say something that shouldn't be said, I need you to throw something at me, because this, I regret the fact that I wasn't involved in the negotiations from the beginning, because I don't like the verbiage, I don't like what's happening, but at least I could have gone maybe and help make a decision a little bit easier. The association had an opportunity to take a smaller budget back in whenever it was, January, by taking the 5% a pay period instead of now, because of the time window, a 10 plus. Mr. Dillard, this isn't a punishment. It's something that this entire city has had to be involved in. And I do understand Mr. Airy's, feelings about it, simply because I spent 30 years with it. So I know what you're saying. By far, I've worked in this community since 1978. And I've watched some of you that are in uniform tonight grow up in this community. I couldn't be, I hate this. I couldn't be prouder of you than if you were my own son and daughter. But, nevertheless, like Councilman Roger said, we are in a budget crisis, and it doesn't go down any easier for us than it does for you. Hutch, I'm sorry to hear you're retiring, because I know a lot of officers look up to you. And you and Officer Dillard are two prime examples of the old and the new that we don't want to lose in this community. We don't. Geez, oh, Pete. Anyway, getting on down to the, I'm going to take a minute. I tried to write all this down so I could keep it straight. I too, like Ann, Councilman Roger, I'm not happy with not understanding the city's position. But I'm not happy with a lot of things that have come through since I've taken this seat. I think when the council talked and when staff talked about being treated the same, I think what they meant was personality-wise, human-wise, they want to treat you the same. Nobody's disputing the fact that if we had it, we would love to just hand it over. We'd give you the checkbook and let you write your check and give it back to us when you were done. Because you do an outstanding service in this community. Each and every one of you from inside out. Hopefully the economy will change and we'll be able to come back together and have a cup of coffee and shoot this breeze over. Did I make any mistakes? Thank you.
Cecilia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with most of what the public comment has been. I think we have an invaluable workforce, an invaluable police force. I apologize that we've gotten this far and we are where we are today. I truly apologize. I think this matter should have been settled a while ago. I have looked for money, and believe me, I have looked for money. There is no money. Furthermore, in February, we will be talking about consolidations. We will be talking about elimination of positions, not in the public safety sector, but in other sectors of City Hall, in other departments. We're talking about having to eliminate jobs in the very near future because of our budget issues. If we do not realize the savings that this council voted on way back when, and if we didn't have the Me Too clause, which I don't like, but is there is just, I don't see how we can go back to all the negotiations again, to the Teamsters and the firefighters, and start over again when we're already far behind. I apologize. There is no money in this city, and perhaps the city has not treated you with respect during the negotiation process. I don't know. I wasn't there. But if that was the case, I apologize for the city. We do value your work, but there is no money.
Mr. Lingle.
As I sit here, I'm trying to figure out if we don't approve this recommendation, where the money will come from. And I look back to a Saturday, we sat in this room for a budget workshop. We had the full day scheduled from 9 to 5. We were out of here at noon. I think the mayor and I both spoke up at that time as to why we're adjourning so early. We still had work to do. I wish I had been more forceful at that time and insisted that we stay till 5 o'clock to find more money. It would make where we are today a heck of a lot easier. I also wish that, with all due respect to the Teamsters, I wish we had not agreed to the Most Favored Nation Me Too clause. I voted against it at the time because I saw what's coming tonight. Because all employees are not, all people are equal. All professions are not equal. We certainly have people in the Teamsters, a high wire worker that probably has as dangerous of a job as a police officer or a firefighter. But I'd say most city workers do not have those professions, do not have the risks. The Most Favored Nation clause, the Me Too clause that we approved with the Teamsters contract was, I feel, the nail that closed the coffin on the rest of the negotiations. So I regret that we did approve that, and I regret we did not spend more time on that Saturday when we sat in this room.
Tony, you said you had a question. Go ahead.
Well, no, real quick, I agree with Councilman Lingle. I absolutely do not like the favored nation clause. I don't. The other thing is, a statement was made that, we've made up our minds. And you know what? When I was sitting out there a few years back, coming to the council talking about different issues, I had that same thought in the back of my head. Their minds are already made up. What the hell's the difference in coming in here or not? But I'm going to tell you right now, ladies and gentlemen, this has not been a decision made until the button's pushed, because everyone up here is torn over this. Don't think they're not, because they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Durham. My turn. I agree with Tony. I couldn't predict how the vote's going to turn out. It's not going to be unanimous, and I couldn't tell you which people are going to vote which way and which are not. We've struggled with this. For those of you that have watched the council meetings for the last year, we've had closed sessions before just about every council meeting. Every week after week, we've had closed sessions to discuss this issue. We've been at it for a year at the council level, just as the negotiations have been at it for a year. Tonight, we had 20 people stand up here, and every one of them tell us that the employees don't deserve what we're being asked to impose. Not one suggested where the money should come from. That is what we're faced with up here. We knew we had a very deep budget hole last January. We proposed to put only a small portion of it, on the backs of our city employees. We first said that we were going to cut services, and we did. We cut the participation in the Flower Festival. We cut the funding for the fireworks. We cut the pool back and closed some of the pool. We cut the library funds. We cut the museum funds. We cut the Chamber of Commerce contract, and on and on and on. We said that we were also going to cut and reduce the level of employees, looking at first the vacant positions, which we eliminated many of them. We eliminated, I believe, 10 or 12. but altogether about 20 positions were unfunded. Most of those, or many of those, disproportionate to the number of employees, were in staff and were in management and were not in the labor groups. Those that were unfunded, it's the same as cutting them. The people are not there to do the job. We said we would be willing to go into our reserves, and we went into our reserves for a substantial contribution to help fill that hole. And finally, we said some of it has to be put on the backs of the employees. And we estimated 7%, with benefits of about 7%, with the benefits, with some benefit reductions and salary reductions across the board. In our deliberations, we asked staff to tell us what would happen if we left out police and fire and only took the cuts across the board. You got a balloon and you squeeze this end, the other end's going to get bigger. If you squeeze 85% of that balloon, the remainder is going to get much bigger. I couldn't stomach the thought of telling other members of our city family that they had to take salary reductions that approached 30%, which would have been needed to save that same amount of money if we were going to exempt police and fire from carrying their share of the whole of the budget deficit. In the family that we would have cut salaries and raised reduced their pay by 30% or close to 30%, we've got the payroll clerks that make sure the police and fire get paid. We've got the mechanics that make sure the trucks and the police cars continue rolling. We've got the building maintenance people that make sure that the police buildings are taken care of. We're one family in the city, not a separate group over here and a separate group over there. I don't know. I wish I knew where the money was coming from, and I wish we didn't have to do this. It's the legal budget took 50% cut this year, and yet any time there have been complaints filed against the police department, we have, as a council, adopted the policy. We'll defend them vigorously because we know our police officers are given the best they can, and we've negotiated, and we've got a reputation, I think, throughout the state. Don't file a frivolous lawsuit claiming police brutality or something like that to the city of Lompoc, because they'll fight it. Even if it costs us as much as we would have lost if we lost the lawsuit, we'll fight it to protect the reputation we've got. That's not, in those cases, it wasn't fiscal issues. It was as much of pride and a support of our police department. But I don't know, I'll make the motion tonight because somebody is going to have to bear it, and I'll make the motion to accept the recommendation of the staff. I don't see where the money comes from. I just can't see where the money would come from to do anything else. By not have the police share of the burden that we ask all the cities to employ, which was just a small part of our problem, by not having a contract go into effect at the beginning of the fiscal year, I believe we're down. We've got a deficit of $250,000 in our budget right now. That has to be made up somehow. And the only way that past deficit can be made up, even if there is a contract that's signed or that's imposed right now, is to start paying back what I'll call overpayment, unfortunately, back to the last 6 months. Sorry, Chip, my turn. I'm going to move for the staff recommendation. I'm going to get no seconds. All right, what are the wishes of the council? No other wishes. No other proposals.
And you thought it was easy?
We're elected to do something.
Personally, and because I'm on the caboose of this thing, I just don't feel that we've, and I know staff has done a phenomenal job. I mean, I spent the last 2 days in this city hall bugging the city administrator, budgets, HR, you name it, talking with officers, talking with staff at the PD, trying to get an idea of how, and because I agree with the mayor, there isn't any money, guys. There isn't. So my question was, what are we going to do? What can we do where we can reach our hand out and you'll meet us halfway? A couple of ideas was given. One of them we can't do because it's a contract from this date to that date. The other we can't do because it comes out of a different budget. I think it's a downfall on both parties, to be honest with you. I think it's a downfall that we didn't come together 6 months ago and say, okay, this is what's going to happen. Whether you like the personalities or not, whether you like the fact that it's going to be an 8 or a 9 or a 10% cut for a year, in no way did anybody wish this economy on our nation. And California was, I think, one of the first to go belly up. So, but I just honestly don't feel that we have done enough to agree on a settlement somehow. And, it's been said on the council up here a couple of times that, and even from the Chief Dabney, we are family. We are. We agree to disagree a lot of times, don't we, Chip? But we're still family. So I personally can't vote in favor of this the way it is now. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if it's going to devastate you worse, because I've been informed that might happen as well, because the window gets closer and closes more. I don't want to see that. So I just don't know where to find it.
Okay, I don't know if I'm way off base on this, and I start like Councilmember Lingle starts sometimes. Can I suggest that we postpone this imposition of the terms and conditions for a month, and the bargaining units and our negotiator get it done? Come up with a creative idea that is going to get us the money that we need, and not play around or screw around, and get down there and sit down with the negotiator and get it done within the next 4 or 5 weeks, because we can't wait any longer. I don't know if I'm way off base on that, but this is just the hardest thing that I've been faced with, and but I would like to see us, like Councilmember Durham said, we have failed each other, and I think we need to just get, and stop, as I said, stop screwing around and come up with a solution to this problem and find us the money. You will have to take a cut. That's all there is to it. That's reality. So, you have to face up to that and just get it done. I don't know. That's my suggestion.
Let me get an answer, if I may. Bill, before we reach a position like we have tonight, there are many very specific steps spilled out in the state law, and we've had to go through those one after another. Do we, by opening at discussions at this time and try to go back, do we risk extending this another 90 days, 120 days, or whatever, by having to go back and go through those same steps again?
I would think that if we go back to the table, we would be obligated then, if we don't come to an agreement within 30 days, to go to mediation again. And
which kind of answers the question you asked, whether we can do it. But Bill, or Joe, do you have the same?
You know, at the risk of, again, an unfair labor practice charge was filed, and me mentioning this, I guess there's no risk in mentioning it again. As time goes, that window gets shorter, smaller and smaller and smaller.
But even that would even make it more so compelling for us to get together and settle it, instead of having that happen.
Well, I would only remind you that it took us, we had to go into court to get our initial meeting. We had to go or tell the attorney for the LPOA that we would go into court if he did not, in fact, set dates to meet. So I'm not optimistic on this thing being settled in 30 days.
If I may, through the mayor, and I hate negotiating out in public like this, what about the possibility of, or an understanding of the group, that if the council were to impose this tonight, that doesn't mean that you couldn't keep talking to each other and come up with some other agreement that could do away with this imposition and come up with something else?
That's correct. In fact, yeah.
We could do that together?
Yes.
And when I say together, I mean if Councilman Martner or Councilman Linger wanted to sit in, could they sit in and listen to this? Because to be honest with you, you know, in the last 2 days, I've heard negatives from both sides of the fence. And there's nobody to say, yeah, that's exactly what happened.
I would suggest that kind of a decision be made in closed session on whether or not you want to have an individual council member as part of the negotiating team.
Well, not as part of, but just to sit in as a, you know, like
even
a
that.
monitor.
Even that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Martin, or Woman Martin, you had your light on at one time a few minutes ago. I'm going to make another editorial comment right here. As the public can probably imagine, there's been a lot of tension in these discussions. They go back a full year. There have been, it's been referenced. There are unfair labor practices filed with the state. There are lawsuits in being right now. There are other legal issues right now, and we've been advised by the attorney to try to limit our comments and be careful what we say. We've been advised to not try to synopsize what we think has happened in the past and other things, because those words, if we don't use the exact terms, could come back to hurt us and bite us. I don't think all of us, any of us, have really abided by that advice. But when we ask, that is also something that we've got to consider when we're talking to you, to try to explain what's on our minds with respect to the issue before us. So, okay, was there?
Yeah, I'd like clarification from Mr. Pannoni. So, if we go ahead and vote for this, can we put a tag on it that, you know, negotiations will still be going on? Or
I wouldn't suggest that you condition the imposition on like that. I would just suggest that if you want to do it, you express saying you adopt the imposition as it is, but you're totally open and you want your negotiator and the police negotiators to come up with a resolution, because if they don't, this imposition is going to stay in effect.
Okay. Thank you.
I think we could direct our staff to be open to negotiations, but I don't think we can address and direct the POA to come to the table. It would have to be them to want to do it. But I think
that's true.
understands that we want to we want to continue this, and it's our direction to him to try to bring us something that we can undo.
Yeah, just for clarification purposes, if what I hear you saying, Mr. Benoni, is that the council would act unilaterally, make the imposition, and the parties go back to the table.
Yes, but adopt this imposition.
Pardon me?
But adopt this imposition.
Yeah, I understand.
Right.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question to finance, and I hope that I'm not putting you on the spot to come up with these numbers, but you know, we're discussing here another potential solution. And before we even go that far, we need to know what those potential solutions are. As the chief of police said, what we need to do is what is in the best interest of the city. Certainly keeping our police force, keeping our trained police force, our experienced police force, it is in the best interest of the city. It is also in the best interest of the city to have a balanced budget and to have a city that functions. So my question is, if we were to change what we have here today, and let's say 5% and do not impose the retroactive pay, that would have to go to the other two labor unions, and I would like to know approximately what is the dollar amount that would put the city in a budget shortfall. And if there is time to take a break right now, I really appreciate it, but I think it is important to have those numbers for deliberation.
If I may, through the mayor, I want to make sure that I communicate clearly with the council. I did not mean that, my thinking wasn't that the council and the staff and the police association would negotiate some different number. It was figuring out a creative way to still come up with the $250,000 nut.
Thank you, Mr. Benoni.
I understand. I mean, one option is to still have to come up with the $250,000. The other option is if we don't, because we don't agree and we're not willing to, or there is a vote that does not say that we will, what would be the consequence, budgetary-wise? What are the consequences in money terms?
Your original questions included what if we do 5% instead of the 10, and that was roughly half. So if you take half of the 250, it's about 125,000. The rough number for the other two entities for the favored nation, I just did it on a note here, it's about another 35 or 40,000. So total about 160,000.
30,000 for both Teamsters and the firefighter union?
Well, they have different amounts that have to go into the budget, so I'm looking at about 20, 25 for fire, and from the general fund portion of the Teamsters, a hand wave of about 15,000.
So the total it would be 125?
About 160,000.
$165,000 that we would be under budget?
Out of budget, yes.
Out of budget. Yeah. For the duration of June 2009 to June 2010.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Lingle.
Just one clarification from Ms. Martiner. Your proposal or suggestion or question was to offer a 5% just for the duration of this contract, or a 5% for the total of the 1 year, which would still mean we would have to go after some back pay. So it would actually be more than the 5%.
If I may, through the mayor, I would advise against you trying to come up with your negotiating strategy sitting here.
Thank you, Mr. Benoni. I think I agree with that. I don't know. I was going to say I'll try again, but I made the motion once and it failed for lack of a second. So, Tony, do you have a suggestion?
Is it possible, because I don't think we got an answer on Councilman Roget's request. Is that a possibility where we could give another 2-3 weeks, knowing you're going to have to put your heads together because you know what we have to come up with? I mean, is it a possibility that we could do this? And if so, I'm in favor of that.
But the impact if we don't is really disastrous.
The impact if we don't is, I'm pretty sure this council is going to have to vote in favor of this bill that's this proposal that's in front of us now.
That's true. The problem is the timing of when you'd be able to do that. Because if you, in trying to summarize, if you renegotiate, you've got to go back to square one to get the impasse process going again. The only way you could avoid that is if the other side agreed that you didn't have to go through that process and you could just go with this impasse, but they'd have to agree to it.
And that's negotiation, which I don't really want us to try to do tonight and sit down and prepare a document, a formal.
So,
God, I hate politics.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. So we're here, I think the LPOA Executive Board is here present. You are listening to us, and you are seeing in what kind of a quandary we are. We're not joking. We are not playing games. We're trying to come to an agreement. Would you speak on the behalf of the police officers? How much are you willing to come up to an agreement? And to what level of agreement are you willing to come up?
The only thing I'd just like to mention is that there is a danger in, and I think we ought to ask the LPO president that he has the authority to speak for the bargaining unit. Because what I don't want to see is another unfair labor practice charge where we're accused of going around their representative. So I would just ask that.
In addition to that, it's not just the board. It has to be the association itself that comes to an agreement, not just the board. So the association has to vote on it. So no matter what someone says tonight, they still need to vote of the association.
I think we're getting into things we shouldn't try to get into up here. I'm going to suggest to you. Well, okay.
I mean, the city's had their opportunity to have Mr. Yononis come up and make several comments. I think it's only fitting that I be able to protect my agency, my association. Can I answer your question directly? Yeah, I definitely can take it back. The attorney is absolutely correct. I can't make that decision on my own. I don't have that authority. I have to take it back to the association. They have to vote. He's absolutely right. Can it be done in two weeks? Got to schedule a meeting, got to give them the information, got to schedule our representative to be here. Probably not 2 weeks, but we can. My recommendation was to direct Mr. Yononis back to the negotiation table. We are willing to work with you, but there are some disparate. There are some information that's been passed out here so far. We've had all these meetings from December to April. Every one of those meetings was, we can do nothing, the city can offer nothing right now, we cannot go into a negotiation because we're waiting for the state budget to fall. So to point fingers that it's taken this long, well, that's really not the LPOA's fault. I mean, that was powers beyond your capability to control, his capability to control, and ours. I mean, that came out of the state, and we had to wait. All those meetings, not all of them were very fruitful. We had one meeting we showed up and we're told, nothing happened, sorry, go home. The meeting lasted maybe 10 minutes. I don't know, you can call it a meeting. I've spoke with several of you. We would be willing to take any proposal back to the association. It would be in our best interest, but I would have to get a vote from the association. But we are willing to entertain any of that. I mean, obviously, we know it's...
Being a cop talking to a cop, you got to know what's going through my mind right now. Why didn't, when you got the budget, why didn't
We made all,
jump on
I
it?
mean.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah,
I would
thank you.
suggest we not get into a
Yeah.
debate back and forth.
I would also further suggest that what Mr. Durham had brought up about, when he asked the city attorney about being able to, having a council member sit in. I know I've spoke with several of you on this before, and you know, we work for you. Be a fly on the wall. Don't be you couldn't be a participating member, but you could surely sit on the edge. Again, get your legal counsel on that. I'm not 100% on that, but I don't see where that would be a problem as long as you didn't interfere or interject. Might be worthwhile to get both sides of the story. Thank you.
Well, Bob.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only options we have right now is we can approve, we can disapprove, or direct staff to come back with further recommendations. That's really all we can do at this meeting. Is that correct?
You could approve the imposition that's being suggested. You could not do anything. If you do nothing, I'm not sure where we are. Or you could do the imposition with giving direction to your staff to unilaterally sit down and see if they can't come up with something, understanding that the imposition has been imposed.
And the consequences of us not approving it sends us back into negotiations because we do not have a contract with the POA.
We have to abide by the existing contract.
By the existing contract, okay.
I'm going to try again. I'm going to move that we impose tonight as recommended by staff. I'm going to also state that for me, one, and I assume the entire council, if something can be worked out that alters this, still gives us the funding solution that we need, I'm willing to consider it if it's 2 weeks from tonight, if it's middle of March, or if it's the middle of June. Talk about it, and as long as if someone wants to walk up and propose something better than what's here, I'll instruct staff to try to develop it and to bring it back. So it's not a matter of trying to get something done in 2 weeks or trying to get something done in 6 weeks or whatever. It would be, but I don't really want to go back to where we were last July or last August when we started the process that got us to where we are tonight. And if we don't approve this thing tonight, I think that we're facing a long settlement. And as I said, there's been tensions and there's been some drastic proposals, and they don't lead me to believe that that we're going to get anywhere if we wait 2 weeks or if we wait 4 weeks to come back and look at this a second time.
So what's your motion?
My motion is to approve, once again, is to approve the staff recommendation, accept it, and to pass the resolution that's proposed. Entirely separate from that, I think we instruct staff to be open to any suggestions from the LPOA that will modify the method that allocates this burden onto the employees, and come back to us with anything that might be reasonable. Because we can amend this at any time. Isn't that right? Just by agendizing it.
If the city and the POA come to
an
agreement, yes, you could do away with this.
Could we make it into a motion? I mean, we say on the table right now is a motion to agree to the imposition, and then could we go ahead and then make another motion urging or directing the staff to?
What I heard the mayor do was combine that into one motion. The motion was to approve the resolution and the imposition, and at the same time, direct staff to be open to communications from the POA to try to come up with a creative solution to still end up with the $250,000 net.
Okay, I'm going to second that motion.
Councilwoman Walker.
Mr. Mayor, Council, one of the things that we've heard tonight is this, that we're not hearing both sides of the story. So in this amendment of the motion, I think we will have to change something as to how we can remove this perception that we're not getting the whole story. And I think that's important for a good faith negotiation. We need to remove the fact that there is distrust between this labor union and the council or the staff. We cannot negotiate in good faith if there is that mistrust. So we're going to have to change that somehow. And I want to make it, and stated in the motion, that the mechanism by which we're going to open the negotiations will have to change, such as that we will ensure that the labor negotiations are in the understanding that both parties know what the facts are. I don't know what else to do. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere. We're going to continue to go into this, one party says this and the other party says that.
I understand what you want. Can I ask you if we can't agree to go into a closed session before or after our workshop next time and discuss in closed session with our attorney and with our HR people just how any discussions like negotiations or discussions on this should be handled, so that we can
I agree.
Yeah, forgive me, but I would only add that the conduct of the negotiations, just like ground rules itself, is subject to the negotiations, is subject to the negotiation process. If you wanted to change the way the city comprises its negotiating committee or something like that, that we could do unilaterally.
But I would suggest that we do that in closed session where we get the advice of attorneys and deal with it. Right now, it's not the kind of a thing we would normally do in an open session and try to establish. I guess I should. I understand what is being proposed. I just think that it would be a lot better for us in closed session to discuss the implications, the methodology of doing that. So I'd recommend. Mr. Lingle.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I need some more clarification from our attorney. There's been a motion and a second. If the motion passes, I understand that we can continue negotiations if we come up with something that's good. If the motion fails, you say that the existing contract stays in effect. Is that correct? In that case, what happens with the other two labor unions?
We'll have to look at it. I'm not sure what the result would be.
Because we have not really, we end up with the same contract we had before. We did not offer the police officers a better contract.
I would rather not discuss it in open.
Okay.
There's a motion on the floor, and there has been a second this time. I'm going to call for a vote. Those in favor, well, let's. And that motion passes 3-2. Thank you. We'll take a couple of seconds because it looks like a lot of people want to clear the room. And at this time, there's really no more items on the agenda. There are written communications. Do we have any to report tonight? We have an additional oral communication period allowing 2 minutes maximum for anyone that may want to speak. Is there anyone that would like to speak to us at this time? Any additional comments from, yes, okay.
And I don't know quite how to express myself, except that what would happen, what would you do if there was a mass murder or disaster where you needed more police coverage? What would you do if you don't pay these people enough money to stay with you or increase their party? What would you do?
I understand the question. I'll let the chief address that, but we do have emergency reserves. We haven't pulled down all of them for this, and that will help pay for overtime. That's one of the reasons we don't want to go into the reserves for any more than we've already gone to solve our problem right now. We might have to dip into those again next year.
Right.
We have agreements with neighboring cities to help each other in case of a major
Because that's
issue.
a possibility.
So,
yeah, I don't like to think.
Chief, do you have anything?
Yeah.
Thank you, Doris. Do you have anything that? You want to what?
Do you want me to address her question?
Please.
Well, my name is Tim Dabney. I'm the chief of police here in Lompoc. If you're talking about a particular incident, isolated incident, or a natural disaster such as a fire or something like that, we have mutual aid agreements with allied agencies for additional staff as well as the ability to pull in off-duty staff. Yeah, we have mutual aid agreements with other agencies, yes.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any other comments, public comments at this time? Please.
There's the comment that you don't have the money. What actually you don't have is the manpower. There are jobs to be done. Why couldn't you form some sort of Lompoc civilian public works volunteer corps or something? There are a lot of people in their 60s who have had professional lives who are not working now because they want to, or not working now because that they're forced to. There's a workforce out here that you could tap if somebody would organize such a thing to do. I understand all the problems with such an idea, but there's people that could do jobs that need to be done who would be willing to do it for nothing.
We have an excellent volunteers group at the Lompoc PD. All you have to do is go in and talk with them. I was hoping you were looking to volunteer.
Part of it, real quickly, part of the problem with doing that, and I know you mentioned that you would have to take your own garbage to the dump, if the money could be used for a police officer, but it can't. The money that pays the money that pays the salary of the operator of the trash trucks comes from your payment of your utility bill. the people that maintain the water lines, the people that maintain the electric lines, that money comes from the utility bill, not from the general fund that pays for police. We're very limited. The general fund, which comes from the tax income, is already 85% police and fire personnel costs. That's even things like the street maintenance and whatever. That's the gas tax money that was put on when Measure A was passed, or when the state gas tax was put on. It's the taxes on gasoline come to us and have to be used only for maintenance of the streets, or only for that money can't be diverted, unfortunately. And we're not going to have volunteers do that portion of the payroll for the police and fire, or for anybody. Those costs are what make up the remaining costs of the salaries in the general fund. So, is there any other public comments? Seeing none, we got one. It's okay. Sorry, Mary.
Are we required to pay consultants that miss big mistakes? Don't we have volunteers that can do consulting work for us?
What kind of, well, let's talk afterwards about consulting. Some consultants on the general plan, environmental impact reports are required to go outside for the independence of the review. We call that consulting. I don't know what other consultants you might be talking about, but we don't have very many consultants left. Okay, I don't see any more comments, and we don't have any more business, and I don't think we want to spend here.
Mr. Mayor, council requests?
Oh, council requests, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bob.
I do have two. First is I'd like to readdress my request that staff prepare a request for proposal for the city fire to be possibly merged with the county fire. I would rather have it on the agenda for at a city council meeting as opposed to at the workshop. If I don't get a second or a third, whatever it is, and it goes to the workshop, that'll be acceptable, but I'd really like to see it agendized.
I would second that.
I'll third it.
Okay, we'll ask staff to put that on with a number of options, or regular staff recommends.
And that is the regular council agenda of the 19th.
Okay. My second request is for staff to put on the agenda for our workshop a discussion of, based on what we saw today, the discussion of treating all employees equally. It was mentioned that all employees were asked to take the similar cuts. Unfortunately, that's not completely true, because we are city employees, city council, and we have not taken any cuts. I realize that we cannot adjust our salaries during a term in office, but if we take an action now prior to the next election, we could choose to reduce council salaries by a certain percentage. And I'd like to have that discussed at the council workshop, so we could, if necessary, we could have it done prior to the next election to go into effect.
I second that.
We'll put that on the agenda for the workshop. That's it. Nothing else? No other lights? Thank you all. I know it's been a long meeting. We're adjourned. I'm turning my light off.
Sorry, I forgot to leave that. That's okay.